Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. This time, I actually brought this up to Laura, and I thought this would be something pretty cool to talk about since this has been the subject of discussion for the last few weeks. We're going to be talking about boundaries, and not like in a sense where we're going to talk about what rules we've established against each other. We're basically going to be talking about the concept of boundaries. One thing that's been really kind of cool is you've been reading a book called Boundaries, and it's been really interesting for you and stuff. And again, I mentioned before, I would like to be able to talk about some of the things that we've read over the weeks, the things that we're kind of implementing in our life to, kind of bring freedom to our marriage or our relationship with the Lord, or our life all around. Mm-hmm. So for this episode, we're going to talk about boundaries. We're going to talk about kind of our testimony with what boundaries have been to the both of us and our experiences with just how we've grown up with our own set of boundaries, how they differ, and how we're learning from each other now. So just, since you've been reading this book called Boundaries, I'd want to give you an opportunity to kind of talk about that for a minute.
Okay. Hi guys. Glad you're tuning in. So I first discovered this book called Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend in college. And I don't remember who recommended it to me or how I got my hands on it, but basically it was a godsend because I needed it, because I had no idea really what boundaries were. But the subtitle is When to Say Yes, How to Say No, to Take Control of Your Life. So basically, this book defines what boundaries are and then what it looks like if you have boundary problems in your life. So what I love about this book is like the first chapter, or like the intro, basically gives this character, they just make up this character named like Sherry, and she is horrible with managing her mental, spiritual, physical boundaries. And they basically they describe a day in the life of Sherry, and it makes you cringe because there's so many ways that she's taken advantage of and so many ways she's stressed out because she can't say no, and her marriage is failing, her kids are really disobedient. And it's kind of an extreme example, but it's to help you see how poor boundary management can not ruin your life, but really take freedom away from you and keep you living in captivity. Yeah. So that's what this book is about.
Have you had any aha moments since you've been reading this book?
Oh, yeah. Because there's a chapter in here. Let me see. It's about how boundaries are developed. And that's chapter 4. And okay. So it talks a lot about your childhood and how your parents raised you and how their poor boundary management transferred to you, and so you never learned healthy boundaries, or you learned poor boundary control, or I don't know, you were just never taught really important things about how to take care of yourself and how to maybe take care of other people. So
do you feel like in the places where you had bad experiences with boundaries, in some places you went so extreme to the opposite end of establishing that boundary?
Oh yeah.
So for your mom, the things that she didn't care about, you decided to care a lot about?
Yeah, it was and I feel like that's maybe not even a boundary thing. That's just a wound that can happen in anyone's childhood where they feel like there was a lack of something, or there was too much of something in their home growing up. So they do the opposite growing up. So one example is my mom didn't really clean. And so I can't say that this is why I clean so much now, but I definitely learned how to clean when I was really young and just got used to it because it drove me crazy. So what's another, I'm sure you have an example of
I think that's actually the perfect example, because a lot of the things that we've kind of gone back and forth about discussing boundaries and, childhood experiences I mentioned at one point, I said, you know, there are some things I'm surprised that you're not like tense about, but then there are some things that I'm really surprised that you're tense about. And one of those things is literally domestic chores, you know, like there seems to be some sort of stronghold with that. Like, and I'm not trying to just like kind of bring you, like make this all about you or something, but this has just been something that's been really sort of perplexing to me, where it's like, why do you care about cleaning so much? And it's been sometimes like the center of our arguments, but now to know that this isn't just some sort of, I don't know, whatever sort of thing, it's now it's a boundary issue, and we're figuring out like how some of the things that I'm not good at with doing dishes or laundry or something, or not doing it to the way that you'd want it to be done. It's like it feels as if I'm crossing a boundary.
I think, okay, so I was going to ask you like to clarify how it's boundary, because I think that's where I'm like blurry. Right. Is okay, how is this a boundary issue? Because it's definitely a top priority of mine, and like a preference that you help me with dishes and help me clean up, and that I'm not the only one like constantly taking care of the house, because it's not only just me now. Like before, obviously, I just cleaned my own room. Like it was just me. My dad did his part, I did my part, and there was really no crossover. Like we had a system going. Yeah. But now we're learning a new system because we've never lived together. Right. And I think it's just learning each other's preferences and respecting that. And I don't really know how it's a boundary thing, but
I'll give you an example, like a deeper example, and it was literally with laundry the other day. Yeah. So when I do laundry, I obviously I'll do it to completion. I put the load in the washer and then in the dryer, and then I take it out and I fold it and then I put it away. But that's still really vague in like how all that gets done. When I did it with you the other day, there was kind of a sense of urgency the majority of the time, because it was like right when we took it out of the dryer, you were explaining to me that we had moments to fold it before it became wrinkly and we couldn't leave it piled up. And to me, my thing was like, okay, I've got a pile of dry clothes in this basket. I'm just going to take it up to the room. I may fold it right now, or I may fold it like later today, and then I'll put it away. And to me, that's acceptable. But so we're both in agreement that there should be an equal effort in getting chores done around the house. But then when I kind of infringed upon how that got done, there was kind of this establishment of territorial authority almost. Like it just, like there was just kind of a moment where you didn't like what I was doing, and it was
I just
really,
didn't like
really
how you were
important.
doing it.
Yeah. And that's, that's fine. Like if there was a way that you did it and like you'd prefer that way, that's one thing. But we kind of figured out a little bit more that I was like, you seem kind of protective of this almost. Like, is this a boundary for you and stuff? And then we kind of dove into that a little bit more, and we realized like boundaries are not just like, hey, here's things that like I do or don't want in our relationship. Boundaries kind of take all sorts of forms in, like, do you know what I'm saying?
I kind of do, but honestly, this isn't how I've understood boundaries to be. I feel like we're talking about just different personalities. Yeah. And different past experiences. Like, you're a guy and I know you, and you do not really care if your clothes are wrinkly. Right. You don't. And right. I really, really do. And I don't think that this goes back. I don't think this is a boundary thing. I think this is like some type of weird identity thing. Like yes, I want to take care of what I have, but I still haven't figured it out myself. But like one thing that I've told you I used to be really insecure about was like, how I appeared at school when I was younger, because I didn't really want a whole lot of people to know like what my home life was like. So I spent a lot of time trying to like, I would figure out what I wanted to wear the next day to school. And I was really insecure about the way that my house smelled growing up. It smelled like a grandma house. My mom had a lot of like antique stuff and she didn't really clean. And so it just had a weird, like old antique smell, but it was so pervasive. Like my friends would come over for like 15 minutes and leave smelling like my house. And it didn't smell like, it's not horrible. Like you've been before.
Yeah.
Did you smell it?
There's nothing like abnormally unique about it.
Yeah, I felt like it was really strong. And
Didn't you say one time though when you were younger, one of your friends came over and said the house smelled weird or something?
yeah, like that would happen a couple times, but also I think there were times like I would walk past someone and they would say like something smells weird. And I don't know. I think I can't really remember, but like I've always been really, I think my personality, I can be a very like type A person about certain things, but then when you mix in like traumatic experiences with that, it makes you like over the top, like critical and like harsh.
So it almost seems like, I guess, bringing it back around to boundaries, you at a young age not knowing that like establishing boundaries was what you were doing, but you were making, like, you were going to take control of these areas, and once you establish control of these areas and defined them for yourself, nobody was going to trespass those sort of things.
Yeah, I guess, because I mean, I didn't have any siblings.
Right.
Didn't have anyone like threatening like my territory, I guess you could say. So well, I was gonna say I would pick out my outfit for the next day and I would wash it in the washer every single night. I would wash my outfit for the next day, which really, come to find out, that doesn't really work.
Yeah.
Like, because like I've graduated high school, I've come back to visit mom, I've graduated college, I've come back to visit, and like I'll do laundry at her house and then I'll bring my clothes back like all the way back to Louisville and it will smell like her freaking house. And I'm like to the point where I'm like, does the water smell like her house? Like,
Yeah.
to me it's such a strong smell and I don't like it. Like it's what used to make me really insecure.
Yeah.
And so I think like I've always been so type A about doing my own laundry ever since then. And then to bring in a person into my life now where it's our laundry, where we're both doing twice as much laundry than we did before.
Yeah.
You're like implementing things that you've always done and I'm implementing things I've always done. And like you really don't care if they're wrinkly and you're super relaxed about it. And I'm like, we have to lay them out flat so they don't wrinkle. Like, I think it's just learning a system with us. And I know that there are things that I'm type A in now that I will have to learn to just relax in. And it won't be as much about my identity and it won't be about insecurity.
Yeah. Well, one thing that this kind of is where I come in as far as boundaries are established or, talked about. I'm coming from a place where it's almost equally sort of an adventure and probably from a place of unhealthiness, maybe, where I have no boundaries because I didn't take time to like learn like what was acceptable to be done in like an area that was probably rightfully mine and what was like not acceptable,
Yeah, I can see that. Let me read this little piece
because when you introduced that character just now, I was like, I probably relate more to her than you do.
You do, because you have a heart to help people and you find fulfillment in serving people. And you're like, I don't think you've figured out yet, like, what things you actually need to take care of and when it's okay to say no to someone so that you can take care of your responsibilities in a day. Because, like, it does, I resonate with, like, it feels so weird to turn down someone when they really need help. Like, this book talks about you need to be able to define your priorities, and even if someone is in a crisis, you still need to be able to, like, discern, do they really need my help right now? Can I really help them right now? Or is there stuff I need to do? Even if this person ends up failing at whatever they were supposed to be doing or needed help with, is it my responsibility to step in right now, today, and help them? Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes you are called to be faithful and be a healthy steward of what God has given you to do in that day, even if someone desperately needs your help.
Yeah.
Because you're not responsible for other people's lives. They are. And so you're actually doing them a favor by saying no and letting them suffer the consequences of what they were supposed to, because you can't rescue them every time. And then you end up being enslaved to other people's needs.
And then what's even worse is you let it get to a point where you don't take care of yourself enough and you allow people to expect that from you. But then when you get to the point where then you take care of yourself so little that you start to fail other people, then they get upset at you. So
and then
you
you're
haven't
not
even
winning.
taken care of yourself.
Yeah.
And then people get upset at you, and then you try harder and take care of yourself less, and it's a vicious cycle to where
no one's winning. No one's actually being helped, and you're depleting yourself.
Exactly.
So that is a boundary problem, and that's what they talk about in chapter 3. So there are compliance, which is the people that say yes to the bad. And so I've explained this to you before. So just to preface our listeners right now, picture boundaries as like your front yard, and guarding the front yard or bordering the front yard is like a white picket fence, and there's a gate, but it's closed right now, but you have the ability to open and close it. It's not a cinder block wall or like a big brick wall. That's unhealthy because you're not able to let good things in or bad things out. And so you should know by now, as humans, we have a tendency to hold on to bad things or negative things and struggle to let them go. And we also struggle to let good things in and like receive love. So you're good at handling, you're reaching a new like spiritual awareness, and I'd say spiritual maturity, if you're able to let go of bad things and let good things in. So that's why we want a white picket fence around our yard. We want to recognize the bad things that are in our yard, open the gate and let that out. And then we want to recognize when something good is on the other side of the fence, and we should let that in. So it's a breathable gate. It can open and close. We don't want any walls. And so that's why I think it's pretty cool that Jesus says like, and also this book talks about how God has boundaries and how he operates in boundaries and how he's our perfect example of that. But I think it's cool how like that verse that I just thought of is like, knock and the door will be open to you. Like another very clear example that God has boundaries is that he will not allow sin in heaven. That is a clear boundary. He will not allow it. Heaven is only filled with love and joy and righteousness and holiness and his presence. God and his presence will not be permeated by sin whatsoever. That's a clear boundary. And so this little section, I will paraphrase and I won't read the whole thing, but this is just really good. And this is a reason you need to read this book. So be listening for yourselves, and is this you or is this not you? The inability to say no to the bad is pervasive. Not only does it keep us from refusing evil in our lives, it often keeps us from recognizing evil. Many compliant people realize too late that they're in a dangerous or abusive relationship. And side note, I have had my fair share of experiences with this. So it's one of the things about boundaries is like even recognizing like how you manage them. Like, are you good at it or are you bad? Like, that's the start is like, oh, how do I handle this? Your spiritual and emotional, quote unquote, radar is broken. They have no ability to guard their hearts. Proverbs 4:23. This type of boundary problem paralyzes people's no muscles. Whenever they need to protect themselves by saying no, the word catches in their throats. This happens for a number of different reasons. So here are reasons that you might not want to say no. Fear of hurting the other person's feelings, fear of abandonment and separateness, a wish to be totally dependent on another, fear of someone else's anger, fear of punishment, fear of being shamed, fear of being seen as bad or selfish, which I feel like that's you. Fear of being unspiritual, fear of one's over-strict critical conscience, which that's definitely me. And I actually wrote little check marks next to the ones that I really resonated with. Mine is fear of hurting the other person's feelings, fear of abandonment and separateness, fear of being seen as bad or selfish, fear of being unspiritual, and fear of one's over-strict critical conscience. And so, yeah, I hope that explains a little bit more about kind of what voice we're listening to on the inside that can drive our lives.
Yeah. So a good question to ask yourself this week is, well, for one, have you ever thought about boundaries? Are you able to define your own boundaries? And do you feel like you're healthy with boundaries? Try to look over your life, look over your relationships, and look over your priorities, and just try to kind of measure to yourself what you think healthy and unhealthy boundaries are, because that's something that we're wanting to dive into at the beginning of our marriage. We realize that just coming from two completely different worlds, if we're not aware of each other's experience with boundaries, and we're not aware of like what we ought to do going forward from here with our own boundaries, there can be a lot of unnecessary conflict that would come about. There could be a lot of unnecessary dissension that would happen. You know, there's just like, I should probably have more of an understanding that you're not so like annoyingly adamant about how laundry gets done because you're just, you know, spoiled or something like that.
I just had a thought, actually.
Yeah.
It's really quick.
Okay.
So you mentioned something earlier about like ownership, or I don't know, like basically it plays into like you had a bigger family and you grew up around more people.
Right.
I did not. I grew up with my single mom who honestly at times was not very present, and the majority of the time I didn't want her to be, because there was just a lot of like dysfunction in that relationship. But it just was way, 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 way easier for me to do my own thing. And so I kind of cut her off as soon as I could really start doing things on my own. And so that allowed me to do everything exactly the way that I wanted it. And because I didn't have siblings, everything was mine.
Right.
You didn't really have as much ownership because you had siblings, you shared stuff. Everyone in your family shared stuff.
There would be days when there'd be a completely new set of furniture in my room, and I'd realize that wasn't my room anymore, and my room was in a different part of the house.
That would literally never happen. I would know.
I would literally just come home, and my mom would be like, "Oh yeah, I moved you to this room."
And see, honestly, when I saw that, I was like culture shocked, because I thought initially I was like, that's really rude. Like, you weren't warned about that at all. That was your space. And I just was totally shocked by that, because if that happened to me, I would blow up.
Yeah.
Because I knew if my mom came in my room and changed anything, and I was just like, stay out, like, get out. And
But to me, and even my brother, you know, we'll come home and our rooms will be painted pink, and it's
well, that's not true.
right, but it's like the furniture thing could happen to the both of us, and we're like, all right.
Yeah, I just can't. I feel like that's a blessing and a curse, because you were blessed with flexibility. You were just like, okay, like, this is completely new and this completely unexpected thing just happened. Okay, go with the flow.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I feel like personally you learned, like, what's mine is not really mine.
Right.
And to me, that's like, you didn't really have like a sense of like yours and your own space. So I feel like that probably made it harder for you to say no to people in the future, because like you didn't have that sense of like, what do I need? What's my space? What's my agenda? What do I need to do?
Yeah.
I don't know. Am I wrong, or what do you think?
You're actually, I mean, you're right, but here's an example of how that could pour into our marriage, right? So my room gets flipped around, right? My space is no longer my own. I'm put in a different part of the house, or my bed just isn't there, or something's different, right? Now, coming into marriage with you, I get up at 5:30 every morning to go to work, or like to get ready for work at least. Mm-hmm. So it's important for me to get good sleep, and it's probably even more important for me to have structure and routine. If I don't learn to establish that healthy boundary of saying, hey, babe, I'm going to need these things to happen for me to get good sleep so that I can work and I can perform and I can, provide and pay for our lives and stuff. But if I never learn how to say no, or make it a point to say, hey, look, there are some things that I can't just have taken away from me on a whim because it affects my sleep. If I move to a new room, if I get a different bed, there's things that I have to get used to all over again. Mm-hmm. So then if we get married, or now that we're married, if you, yeah, seriously, but like if you change up the room all the time and I come home to a different mattress, or the room's rearranged, or the blackout curtains are gone, and I'm used to sleeping a certain way and it throws me off, and I just kind of go with it, I'm going to get tired and not perform as well, and then you're going to get upset and you'll be like, well, what's the problem? And then I'm going to be like, well, and then I'm going to be like, well, you're always changing up my space or stuff. You're always changing up my sleeping routine and you're like, well, you've never said that before, so why is it a problem now, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's like what I said at the beginning when you moved in and stuff. I said, hey, look, there's a few things that I really want to be involved in and have a lot of influence in when you move in. The blackout curtains, I was really adamant about. The temperature of the room, I was really adamant about, because even now, taking the room down to 66 degrees, I'll still wake up sweating.
Yeah, and it drives me insane.
Yeah, but there are some things
like, stop sweating.
Yeah, but there are some things that I know are going to give me a good night's sleep.
It's like most wives, sorry, I'm still on this. Most wives are like, you're snoring, like punch them in the face, right. But I'm like, you're sweating.
I'm literally like up in a pool of sweat.
Please just figure out a way to regulate your temperature, for the love of God.
Well, the thing that the weighted blanket that you bought me, like, I love that, but I've made a point about that, on how that's something that I really desire to have so that my sleep is better. Mm-hmm. And that's me creating a healthy boundary by saying, look, there's a couple things, like, I'm going to take my boundary down on how this apartment's decorated, because I know it's more important to you than it is to me. That's yours. This picture frame, the couch, how the furniture's arranged, all that's you. That's
I
something
really
that
feel like you're talking about preferences and they're not necessarily boundaries.
But the reason that like it always kind of boils down to boundaries is because there are some things that people are used to, and then there are some things that people aren't used to. So it is preferences, but it is also a boundary issue. So if I was somebody that grew up in a household where the furniture was never rearranged and it had been
My
like
mom.
that for like 20 years.
Yeah.
Okay. But then I come home and you rearrange the furniture every other week or something like that because you're just you're testing it out. It may be a preference that I would want you to keep it in one spot, but it'd be a boundary that I'd be communicating like, hey, I'm used to this. This is how I'm comfortable. This is what I want. This is important to me. And I'm going to shut the gate on this.
I see it more as like same scenario, but you're cross. So if hold on, what did you say? I was the one that didn't
Was moving the furniture.
Okay. So if you're the one who furniture was never moved in your life ever, and then I like switch it around like every other day and that bothers you,
Yeah.
I would say it becomes a boundary issue when you can't say anything about that. When that it's causing you discomfort and you're like, I don't know how to communicate this in a way that, because like I said, like the list of like reasons why you can't say no, like fear of abandonment, fear of disconnectedness, and fear of looking selfish. That would be a boundary issue.
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying is our preferences can then boil down to boundaries.
Right.
But I say we have really good boundaries so far of communicating with each other, at least.
Yeah.
I'd say ways that we might go wrong sometimes is over communicating, because we're both talkers. We both are very outspoken with each other, at least. Like you're more outspoken than I am, like overall. Yeah. And like you're more confident in your opinions, so you'll share those more.
Yeah.
But like with each other, sometimes it's like a lack of boundary management in our own lives is when we overshare in times where neither of us can really like healthily talk about it at that time. And like we talked about that in marriage counseling, where like sometimes we have like 5 issues and we want to hash all 5 of those at one time. Right. And we just want to fix it all. And so we like open the can and just spew everything. And then it's so unproductive because we just like tried to talk about too many things at once. That's a boundary thing. Like we need to be able to say like, okay, let's talk about this and set everything else to the side. But I really would say like the laundry thing, I'd say it's maybe not, I can see in a way how it is a boundary thing, but like it's not the boundary that these 2 authors are talking about in this book.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you noticed there's a wall there with Laura because she is handling this in a way that is foreign to me. Like, why does she care this much?
And also, you are becoming foreign to me. Like,
thanks.
Well, here's what I mean by that. It'll be like, there will be some things that if I do them and you don't like them, you'll react in a way where it's like, like you're peeved or something or slightly annoyed. Mm-hmm. But then I could do the same minor thing with the laundry and it's way more.
Yeah.
Like it's intense and it is foreign, where I'm like, I don't recognize what's going on because the way that I'm literally like how quickly I'm folding this laundry is becoming heavy for you. And like there are some things that I do that are like ridiculous and like may annoy you from time to time that you don't care about. But for some reason, I'm not folding this laundry quick enough, and it's like I'm, kicking your dog or something.
Yeah.
And I'm
well,
like, what is...
I just had a thought. Like, maybe this is a bad thing that I'm holding in, that laundry needs to be done this way or I am not okay.
Right.
Which is, it sounds literally so dramatic. And when I go back and listen to this, I'm going to be like, okay, you need to chill. But, it's just a thing that I was always allowed to have control of. And so now that like you're coming into the picture and like you're doing it in a different way, I'm realizing how much of a control freak I am about like how I want my laundry to be washed, how I want it to be folded, how I want it to be put away. So, I think maybe that this could be a bad thing that I'm holding in, and you are showing me something good on the other side of the fence that I can let in, which is like, it's good to stay on top of your chores and like be faithful, but you're not going to be unloved if your clothes aren't like pristine.
Right.
You're not going to be any less happy if your clothes are wrinkly. You're not going to be a horrible Christian if you don't do everything perfectly.
Right.
Like, that's not really what I think, but for some reason I just like I remember when I lived with Dad, I would at least lay my clothes out flat before I folded them, so that they wouldn't wrinkle. But like, I would bring them upstairs, and sometimes I'd leave a pile of clean clothes in my room forever, for like weeks, and I wouldn't put them away. I think it's just the fact that I don't want them to be wrinkly.
Yeah. But see, there's the balancing act, because literally tonight is my night to do the dishes, and
decided tonight.
Like,
I was like,
tonight.
Drew, Mondays are your day to do dishes.
Right. But to me, I'm going to have to give more of an effort on striving to kind of be excellent in doing the dishes,
and the laundry.
I could very well leave out like 4 different forks or whatever, and I won't notice. So there's this balancing act of like, you are adamantly caring about the perfection of these things getting done, and I am very much on the other end of like, oh, that dish will somehow find its way into the dishwasher like tomorrow or whatever. So
I'm
there is
rolling
a balancing
my
act.
eyes for everyone that can't see me.
But yeah, that's just basically, though, I just kind of think it's fascinating and cool, and something that I wanted to do like at the beginning of our marriage is just kind of give an illustration on our understanding of boundaries and where we're at, and like kind of how we perceive things right now and what it'll look like going forward. So I've got a couple ideas for me, but I want to give you a chance to go first.
Well, I don't know what you mean, so how about you go first?
Okay, well, what I was going to say is I wanted you to give like kind of a brief goal of what you want to look like with your boundaries, like in the future, like how you want to establish them, or how do you want to learn from them, or how do you want to handle them?
Well, one thing that I specifically would love to like be better in is practicing self-control when it comes to anger. And like this book talks about like boundaries and emotional management and stuff like that. But that's one thing, is like I won't be able to experience the beauty of the fruit of self-control if I'm just like choosing to just like act in my anger about something that you're not doing all the way perfectly. Like, okay, that didn't make sense. It's something that you're doing that I don't think is, you're doing it good enough, basically.
Yeah.
And sometimes I really need to freaking realize that my love for you and communicating my love for you is much more important than how things around the house are done. Like, what's like a story with Jesus where like he totally just like
Mary and Martha.
Yeah, he overrided the task and said no relationship with me is more important, or communicated like no, you are more important than what I'm supposed to be doing right now.
Well, Mary was sitting at his feet wanting to only spend time. She was wanting to only spend time with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And Martha was getting upset because she was trying to make the place like nice for Jesus, which is, admirable and hospitable, but like he was already there. And he just said to Martha, like, hey, I'm already here, and I'd rather you be with me than be all concerned about what's going on everywhere else, almost. And hopefully I'm getting that right. Like, I'm not describing it perfectly, but Martha was more upset at Mary for not, making sure the place was ready for him, and Jesus was like, I'm already here. Spend time with me. Like, that's, the way this house looks and these chores are not as important as the relationship that's occurring right now.
Yeah. They actually talk about Mary and Martha in this, and so I'm like trying to find it.
I do feel like that passage in scripture is so perfect to like just shed light on things are good and like to a certain extent, but then if those good things are prioritized over better things, then sometimes they can become bad things. And I know that was
say that again?
That was kind of a tongue twister almost. I said good things can be good up to a certain point, but if they cloud over better things, then sometimes those good things can become bad things. Like, if I'm so worried.
Oh, I found it.
Okay, go ahead.
Do you want to finish your thought?
What I was just going to say is like literally the holidays are coming up. And if we're okay, my mom does this every year. Perfect example. Okay? She makes our entire house look like it's freaking Disney on ice.
The North Pole.
It looks like nobody lives there by the time all the family shows up. She moves all the chairs so that it looks like nobody sits. Like, it's so weird. But she does a season's worth of work in the house in 2 days, and she rounds up everybody to do it with her, and it's so frustrating and aggravating. Dust, mop, bleach, clean, wipe down, sanitize, fold, all this stuff to make it look like a 5-star hotel. And the entire family gets there, and nobody says a word on how amazing it looks. Like, nobody goes, wow, this place, wow, you cleaned up so nice. It looks so great and everything. Everybody just gets there and says hello, and everyone starts having community and talking and stuff. All the while, me and Jack and Gracie have the hugest chip on our shoulder from like doing all of these things that Mom just put in our lap in an instant because she wanted the place to look nice. All the while, nobody cares. No one cares. And it's still like, it is still a good thing that you would want to clean the house and prepare the place. And like, Mom, obviously, if you listen, I'm not dogging that at all. Like, you make the place look really good, but it's like when there's so much that happens and it's exhausting and like just morally backbreaking to the point where like everyone's kind of lost their cool with each other and relationship is almost strained by the time people get there. It's like, what good was that? What's all that cleaning, Yeah. And that's just my perspective as a guy, probably.
This kind of plays into what you're saying is kind of goes into like the Mary and Martha situation.
Yeah.
So this little section is in functional and relational boundary issues. So this chapter is talking about boundary problems. So there are controllers and non-responsives.
I'm gonna fix your cord real quick.
There are compliance, and then there are avoidance. There's, you have a name, like your most dominant boundary issues, like, are categorized.
Really?
So it's crazy. But, this says a final boundary problem involves the distinction between functional and relational boundaries. Functional boundaries refers to a person's ability to complete a task, project, or job. It has to do with performance, discipline, initiative, and planning. Relational boundaries refer to the ability to speak truth to others with whom we are in relationship. So if you have a hard time speaking truth to people, that's a problem. Like, you have a relational problem. If you have a hard time planning things out and completing tasks or projects, that's a functional boundary problem. So another way of looking at it is that functional boundaries refer to our Martha parts and relational, our Mary parts. And this is in Luke 10, verse 38 through 42. Mary and Martha were friends of Jesus. Martha prepared dinner while Mary sat at Jesus' feet. When Martha complained about Mary's not helping her, Jesus said, "Mary has chosen what is better." That's in verse 42. He didn't mean that Martha's busyness was bad. It was just the wrong thing at the wrong time.
Exactly.
Many people have good functional boundaries, but poor relational ones. That is, they can perform tasks at quite high levels of competence, but they may not be able to tell a friend that they don't like their chronic lateness. The reverse can also be true. Some people can be absolutely honest with others about their compliance and dislikes. Some people can absolutely be honest with others about their complaints and dislikes, but unable to get up for work in the morning.
There you go.
So we've taken a look at the different categories of boundaries, but how do you develop boundaries? Why do some people seem to have natural boundaries and others have no boundaries at all? As with many things, it has a lot to do with the family in which you grew up. And so the next chapter goes into how boundaries are developed. But I would say, I don't know where you would fall in that. I think you're more, I don't know, Drew. Like, I think that you can tell truth to people, but you're very, I've never heard you straight up say, like, dude, you're living in sin or something.
Yeah.
Or, like, I know you speak truth to me, but I'd say you struggle more with functional boundaries than you do with relational.
Yeah.
But it's like you're about even in both. Like, you can complete a task or a project or job, but when someone needs your help, or when someone like cuts in and interrupts that flow that you have going on, you'll quit that and then go help that person. And that's a relational issue because you can't say no.
Yeah.
But you can tell people truth.
Yeah.
But I don't know, what do you think about me?
I think, well, I think it flip-flops with you sometimes, because the boundaries that you have with me are different than the boundaries you have with people. Mm-hmm. And you even talked about this, like, as our relationship got deeper, there were some things that you talked about where you were like, this is weird because I don't do this with anybody else, but it almost seems like the closer I get with you, the more I establish harder boundaries with you.
Might be because I have more, I'm more confident that you're not going to leave me.
Right.
So I'm like, oh, I can be honest with him and he's not going to abandon me.
Right. But then it's also more like you don't have to create barriers and walls with people that don't have as deep of a relationship with you, because you have the ability to, somewhat control the initial perspective that a lot of people have. So like at church and everything, it's, I don't know. Do you feel like I'm going in the right direction?
Yeah, sorry, I was gonna yawn and I hit the microphone.
Oh, yeah. But I don't know. I think it goes a little bit back and forth with you because I'll watch you, you know, not be afraid to have like brick walls with people that are close, but then if, you know, people that we don't know are coming over and everything, your walls come down and they turn into picket fences with those people. Almost.
Wait, so you're saying, because I think I agree with you, like when I'm with people that I'm closer with, I have more brick walls.
Here's an example. The way that you would get about me folding our laundry and everything, you wouldn't say anything to people that like don't know you as well.
Yeah. Yes.
You wouldn't give a strong boundary for
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So, and I think it's just more like,
I think it's because
I
the
don't know what
closer
that is, but
the closer you are to me, the more of a threat it is to me, because the more you could hurt me if you do something wrong.
yeah.
So if a person doesn't really know me very well and they do something that like really bothers me, well, first I don't even let it really bother me because I'm like, well, they don't know and they can't do that again because we're really not that close. And so it's like forgivable, like you're kept at bay.
Yeah.
So there's really no need to worry about it.
Yeah.
But the closer you are to me, it's like the harder for me. It's harder for me to figure out because I'm like, okay, what does it mean to let this person love me? And what does it mean to love this person despite my preferences, despite my like pet peeves, despite like where I have boundaries, like the way that I connect with people is I like to talk and share emotions and like what's your story? Like what was that like for you? How did you feel in that moment? Like but some people, that's a boundary that they don't want crossed yet.
Yeah.
And connecting with them looks different. Connecting with them looks like, well, I just want you to hang out with me and get to know me first and not talk about deep things and let my trust build for you. But I'm like, well, I'll trust you the more I know you. So let's dive in.
Yeah.
So it's just a difference of people and their personality and stuff like that.
So long story short, it doesn't boil down strictly to one very specific thing or another. Sometimes people are really, really different. But I think... Stop hitting the microphone. They're going to hear that.
I know.
But, well, anyways, long story short, that to me feels like a good illustration of where we're at with boundaries right now and kind of creating our roadmap to like what establishing better boundaries between each other and for people outside of our marriage look like, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, I think this is a good time to cap it off. Do you have any final thoughts on, you know, boundaries or anything that you would want people to know about the book that you've been reading so far?
You just need to read it. It's so good. There's so much that I keep thinking of that's just like pinging in my brain, but you just have to read it. It's so good.
And it's called Boundaries by who?
Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend.
Cool.
I think that's how you say it.
Maybe we can come back and do another review of this book when you get done reading it.
Yeah. Or just like a few more chapters in or something.
Cool. All right, guys, that was beautiful boundaries. And I hope that was something that, you know, kind of shed some light on something for you guys. It's been something that we've been kind of walking through and growing in. So hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.
Yeet.